this esteemed panel. I sort of feel giddy that we have these folks. There are bios available if you can pick one up right outside. So these folks are far too esteemed for me to read all through these 2 pages, but I want to give you a highlight to who we have here. So to my left, Dipankar Mukherjee is the artistic director of Pangea World Theater in Minneapolis. Professional director from Calcutta with a 25-year history of directing. His aesthetics have evolved through his commitment to social justice, equity, and deep spirituality. And these are the factors, along with relevant politics, which form the basis of his work. Next, we have Natalie Sowell, who is the director of the School of Theater at University of North Carolina, Greensboro. She's taught and served in administrative roles at Hampshire College in Amherst for the past 16 years prior to coming to Greensboro. Founded the Child Drama and Community Program, and currently serves as the Dean of School of Interdisciplinary Arts. Specialized in applied theater for social change, creative drama, critical literacy, and oral storytelling. Sowell is a trained theater for the oppressed practitioner, having studied with Augusto Boal, Julian Boal, the Top Lab, New York, and the Center for the Theater of the Oppressed, Northeast. Brackley Frayer from UNLV is a professor of lighting design, former chair of the UNLV theater program. We're going to discuss a program that he and Dipankar have developed that is particularly interesting when we talk about institutional outreach and networking. And Brackley has also served on the board of URTA and leads the portfolio design review at LDI. He's designed, your credits are too numerous to list as a designer, but suffice to say, a bunch of places. And on the end here we have Sara Becker. Sara holds the Patricia Brown Distinguished Professorship in Shakespeare and Voice at University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Serves as the head of voice and text at American Players Theater, where she's coached for 14 seasons. And her work as a voice and text coach has also taken her to a bunch of places. So thank you all for coming here. Really appreciate it. What we spoke about last year at our plenary was the issue of belonging. So I think everyone in this room at this point in time is very familiar with the value of diversity in our, losing my iPad, in our institutions, because it's the students that are coming through our institutions that populate the professional field, and we all know what the professional field looks like, right? So I'm sure whatever you're recruiting in, if you're recruiting actors, lighting designers, directors, arts leaders, a primary value in you're seeking these candidates is candidates from underrepresented communities, diversity, diverse region in background, etc. All of this. Wonderful. What we found that was missing, or at least under-discussed, was what happens after you recruit folks, whether it's students or faculty. What's the environment that they're coming into? Have you taken into account anything about the program that may need to adapt or evolve to be utile for these people, to be productive and welcoming? So that was what we discussed last time, and we had a great panel then, and they brought up a lot of things that you should be aware of, that you should consider. We heard some personal experiences from folks who have gone through training programs, and it was wonderful. What we want to do today is to build on that, and everyone here has some great examples of tangible success that they have come to and continue to come to, that I hope can inspire all of you, because I know, having talked to a lot of you, that one of the overarching questions that a lot of folks have is just, where do I begin? Where do I start? What do we do, right? And there's no one answer to that, but I'm hoping that engaging with these folks and learning what they have done and how they did it, that can inspire some ideas for you to take home. We'll have some time for question and answer at the end as well. So that's where we're going, and we'll see where the conversation leads us. Great. I do want to start with Natalie. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you became the director of the School of Theater in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Yeah. So, and can you all hear everyone okay? These mics should be
Well,
big.
right here to the back.
Great.
Yep.
Yes.
We'll project.
Yeah, because these mics should be picking up a little bit, but maybe not. They're not maybe doing the best job. But I think we have to start with that in terms, because that I can't imagine where you begin. But I want to talk about some of the things that you were able to do in the last 2 years, Deborah. Where did it start? If you want to talk about coming into that role at that time, and what were some of the considerations and challenges in that?
So basically the UNCG was, the School of Theater had been through a revolution. So the students were very, very clear in their dissatisfaction with the curriculum, with the lack of representation. UNCG is a minority serving institution, and in the School of Theater for 25 years there were no faculty of color. So we had adjuncts and we had guest directors, but we had no presence that was permanent. The students said enough, and so things began to turn a corner. And so then I'm the cleanup crew. But you'll notice that a lot of what's happening in our profession, in our spaces, is that we are bringing in professionals, BIPOC, LGBTQIA, all of those folks to come and switch gears for us rather than with us. And that distinction, I think, is key. They weren't ready for me, right? Even though it's my alma mater. It's where I got my MFA in Theater for Youth. So some of my professors, I am now their supervisor, which is a very interesting and wonderful dynamic on a daily basis. But what we did was start with assessment. We needed to know what we were doing that needed to be shifted. Otherwise, it was just panic and a lot of fear, right? Fear of the students, fear of being canceled, fear of saying the wrong thing. And what we needed was an ability to lean into that and move, right? Because otherwise we could just stay stagnant and shake in our boots, but instead we decided, okay, what are we doing? How are we best supporting our students in a university that isn't necessarily reflected back to them within the school? We now have 3 BIPOC faculty members. We have 25, there are 25 of us, faculty and staff in the School of Theater. So 3 is a step. And part of my job, my role, my responsibility is to keep pushing us to continue making those steps. Fit is something that I would like to caution us in thinking about. Fit for whom, right? Fit for the faculty who feels comfortable for you, or who is the best fit for our students. That's who we should be considering. We have done a lot in the past of fit for us, because we've been here and we're holding steady, but that also means that we're not moving. The other thing we did is our dean, the dean for the College of Visual and Performing Arts, gave a mandate that everyone needed to decolonize and de-Eurocentrize the curriculum. So we didn't actually have a choice, so I was really excited about that. And it meant digging. And one of the first things we did was provide access to Nuclei Exchange. So now it's a database on campus that you can search. So you don't have to pay for it, you just log into the library and it's available to you. It meant that faculty needed to also learn. Sometimes we're a little bit hesitant to try new things. We have to. In order to keep up with this next generation of young people, our students, we have to move where they're going rather than asking them to go where we'll take them. And that's a different pedagogical model. We're very used to the model where the teacher knows everything. I'm a big proponent of Frayer and pedagogy of the oppressed, where it's not the banking model where I shall pour into you, but here we are at the table all together, co-learning. And you're bringing your cultural capital into the space with mine and my knowledge, and together we'll co-create meaning. But especially with our grad students, we can't just say, come in and we'll shape you, right? There's a reason why they were attracted to our space and that we were attracted to them. So it's kind of a synergy needs to be created. The other thing that I think we forget to do in theater is teach them how to collaborate. We're very good at saying, you individual are amazing. Let me help shape you, individual. And the other people, yes, they exist, but we're not going to teach you how to communicate with them and how to work with them. So we're trying to reshape so that we're centering the idea of ensemble and paying attention to the work that's created out in the world. You need to know how to devise, right? You need to know how to do some autobiographical scripting. You need to know some other tools other than Meisner and Stanislavski, right? Love them, but they are not the only people who have thought about how to act, right? So where are our other tools? Where are the other tools available to us? And then lean into that fear so that you move.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many questions already. Let's talk, you talked a lot about, I think, recruiting faculty and faculty searches, and that's a big part. We talk a lot about students, but it kind of goes hand in hand, right? Because, part of creating an atmosphere for diverse students is they see themselves represented there, right? That's the faculty. Can you talk a little bit about conducting a faculty search today, and especially in an area where BIPOC faculty are very much in demand, right? And how difficult is it finding? It must be very competitive at this point, and what does that mean in terms of not just finding those folks, but getting them to say, yes, I'm coming to your school, as opposed to maybe 5 other schools that are interested in recruiting?
I'm going to be very honest. It helps that I'm the director of the School of Theater. It helps to know that there's someone who might have an understanding of their experience, who is helping them to move into that space. And I spend a lot of time with our BIPOC faculty, all 3 of us, right? But we spend time supporting one another because there's all the invisible labor that we don't, it's not acknowledged. And part of what I have done is put it into the annual review so that it is not invisible. You actually get credit for that work that normally we don't acknowledge. And then I am really honest that here are the steps that we're taking, but these are baby steps. And it's gonna take us a while to get to where we're going, but this is a really beautiful opportunity to make the change, to be a part of the change, and to have your voice be heard. Otherwise, it is welcoming folks into tradition, which is not a bad thing, but that's not where we are in theater right now. We can do both and. We really can. So the honesty is a big piece of it. You just have to be okay with telling people, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. We're excited to have you come in and work with us, but you need to know that everybody's doing this work, and I am holding everyone accountable to doing the work.
Second part of that, in terms of building the faculty, so one is searches and finding new folks, but you obviously have professors that are there, some tenured, may have been there for many years.
4 years.
Yeah. So you talked about the need for them to continue to learn, and I think that is a really interesting, something I want to dig into, because I think we're all familiar with folks that may have been somewhere for a very long time. They're like, this is what I do, I feel like I do it well, why do I need to change? There could be resistance. But even for, maybe not those folks, but maybe there's folks that say, yes, I've been here for a long time and this is what I do, and I see that we need to change, but I don't know how to do it. It's frightening. And what do I do? And what are some of the avenues that you're able to create for them to acquire new knowledge, new learning, new pedagogies and approaches that they need?
One of the first things is the plays, right? The canon, what we call the canon. Unpacking that and discussing what it is about these things that make them the canon, and then pushing them to the side and saying, we're gonna forefront new work that hasn't been unpacked and discovered because it'll be fun for you, right? Maybe not fun, but it'll be interesting, right? It'll be interesting for you, and your students will watch you learn. That is okay for them to know that you're not the holder of all knowledge, because you're not, right? There's no way for you to keep up with the ever-expanding world that is the profession of theater. You can't do it all by yourself. But we, as a collective, can get excited and say, oh my gosh, I read this new play, and it was fantastic in my lighting class because we talked about it from this vantage point. The other thing that we've done is with our season, right? So with season selection, we have a committee called Scaffolding Change, which is our EDI committee within the school. It is heavily run by the graduate and undergraduate students with faculty co-chairs. There's an undergraduate co-chair, 2 faculty co-chairs, and a graduate student co-chair. So there are 4 of them. And the season selection process is run through that committee. So instead of it being separate from it, it has to be, approved.
Part and parcel?
Yes, approved by the Scaffolding Change Committee. And then, I guess a big piece of that is that becomes part of the curriculum, right? What are the plays that we're reading that we might want to produce? Okay. And also, we're doing a common read because we're producing Rogue, right, this spring. A bunch of classes read Rogue in the fall. Because what I want more than anything is for them to be critical analysts rather than consumers. And waiting for opportunities? No, we've had so many guest artists who have said, stop waiting for someone to choose you. Make work and choose the people that you want to work with. Yes. And you can do both at the same time. What else was faculty? Faculty are really hard. Faculty are the harder part. The students, the grad students are like, yes, let's do that, which is fantastic for those who teach, because then they're also impacting the undergrads. So it's this beautiful cycle, and I really believe in reflective practice. Okay, so here was our season, what worked. Our students were thrilled with last season. Why? Because we're not doing trauma-based pieces about BIPOC folks, right? Like that's the only thing you can do is we need a slave narrative, and now we have representation, we're good. Check that box, right?
Yeah, please.
What percentage of UNCG student population is diverse?
It's 50%. So when we say minority serving institution, it is half and half. So half BIPOC and half white.
The only reason I ask is that UNLV, we were voted the most diverse student population in the country, so I feel very fortunate.
Can you speak up just a bit, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm not a doctor. I asked that question because I teach UNLV, and I was voted as the #1 diverse student population in the country. I feel very fortunate that I'm working there. And but I also taught at Dartmouth College in Middle New Hampshire, so it depends on the community that you're teaching in, how well you can do what some things you're doing. At West Virginia, there was another student population. In Florida, there was another. So I've seen a whole different dynamic happening right around the country. That's all.
I think that's probably some of what you were talking about in terms of the season selection and the surrounding study. I think, can we segue to pedagogy, curriculum a little bit, Sara? Because I wanted to ask you from like a classroom level, what are some of the adaptations, evolutions, et cetera, that you have come to over the last few years? Like what were you doing maybe 3 years ago versus now? How has that, what impact has that changed? Pick a few. But, you know, at the, sort of at the classroom level.
I'm barely considering myself mid-career, and the way I teach now is so different from the way that I started to teach or that I was taught, that we're in the center of a revolution. So some of the things that we do at my institution in my classroom is that all of the freshmen are trained with theatrical intimacy education, so that they know when they're in a room, they know how to rehearse with their peers in a way that allows them to fully explore safely. So they have that common vocabulary. We also brought in TIE to work with the faculty on developing group agreements for every class, so that we're laying the
For
groundwork.
those who might not know, what is TI?
Oh, theatrical intimacy education. So that you set the groundwork of a room that feels like everyone can bring their authentic selves. If we want the work to be authentic, we have to create the room where people can be their full authentic selves. So, and what I've learned is, it's okay if that takes time. I will confess that early on, when issues like this happened, I would feel my heart race, and I would feel warm, and I would feel like I had to go quick. And I've learned that when I have that happen to me, and I stick my foot in it, I actually have to do the opposite. I have to slow down, and I have to listen. Because if I'm being met with something, I'm being asked to learn, which is really, really fantastic. So, I mean, this topic is so huge. I used to teach, because one of the things I teach is text analysis. And when we learned rhetoric, we learned George Bernard Shaw. We all worked on a George Bernard Shaw piece. And I love George Bernard Shaw. And now, so that there's more points of entry for all of the students, everyone brings in a political speech. And it doesn't have to be a person in power having a political speech. It can be a revolutionary figure having that speech. It's the same skill. I used to teach poetic text with Eugene O'Neill, and now it's, here's a list of 20 authors, just to get you started, and you will bring in the poetic text that you want to explore. So we're really more co-creating, and not, you know, who wants to learn what today, but the skills are the skills that have been picked up and carried forward and moved through by multiple identities of tellers. So another important thing I'm not directly involved with, but I certainly benefit from, is my colleague in Devise, Andy Paris, teaches everyone how to critique work, how to talk about what you're seeing, beyond good or bad, or it didn't speak to me, or, you know, so that there's a real depth of engagement. And I've practiced that myself in a concept I learned called neutral mirroring, which as much as possible takes away my unconscious biased lens. And that includes practices like, here's what I'm getting. Is that what you'd like me to get? Right? How do you want me to see what you're showing me? Tell me about what you want me to get from that. So it really opens up more of a dialogue. And I just feel as difficult as growth and change can be, a lot of these practices end up in work that has enormous depth and enormous complexity that are beyond my wildest imagination. So I think there are aspects of it that are hard, but there are also aspects of it that are a little easier because I get to co-create with them instead of that model, like you said, like I'm just pouring into open heads. So that's what it's been like for me.
It's fascinating. I bet there's so much for us to cover. I want to move on to Dipankar and Brackley because there's a really interesting, I don't know whether to call it a program or what it is, but you're going to tell us about it. But you know, we talk a lot. We've talked, you know, the institutional change, faculty, students, a lot of folks are coming from universities to say, like, how could I couldn't do any of this. We don't have any of these resources to start. Maybe it's because they're at a state university in a very non-diverse region, or they're any number of reasons why they feel sort of out of reach to begin these changes within the institution. But what I think is important to keep in mind is that you shouldn't think of yourself as limited to the institutional resources that you have. And you guys have created a really interesting way for an institution to reach outside of itself and find these resources and relationships. Dipankar, do you want to talk about how, or
I'll start.
yes, talk about first, like how it came to be. Yeah.
Zoom. Without Zoom, Mr. Zoom had helped us collaborate with what we've done. In my design classes, I'm always disturbed that the students don't read plays unless they have to in a class or if they're doing one. So I wanted our designers to be more well-read in the literature. And so every Friday morning, we would design plays of genres that they haven't really looked into. And we just sit around in a coffee house and just talk about the play. Not necessarily going to talk about designing the play, but just dramaturgical, what the playwright, what was happening at the time. And we did that, and we were doing, your standard plays, O'Neill, and I did The Balcony. And then the Zoom happened, or the pandemic happened, and a number of us lighting designers were on that platform Slack, and because we were all wondering, how are we going to teach design on Zoom? So all these teachers around the country poured in ideas, and Mark Stanley from BU put in one and said, I want to have our students read more diverse plays. So we put a number of plays, and I said, I'm going to take that. I'm going to use that for my Friday. I'm going to use that for my Friday morning sessions. And then Dipankar, who I had known since 1990, we brought him, UNLV brought him in to direct The Raising of the Sun. I think it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when we first met. And we continued, he was working at the Guthrie at the time, we continued our conversations and our friendship, and then he went and opened this Pangea World Theater 25 years ago. We kept talking, and then he calls me right at the same time that I was doing this new literature, and he says, Brackley, I have 2 director mentees. Can you zoom in with them and tell them what lighting design is? And I said, I have a better idea. I said, could you and your 2 mentees join us over Zoom and talk about these plays? So one of his director mentees is an Afro-American, Native American from Minnesota. And the other is an Arab American who lives in Chile. So Zoom is perfect. So we had Friday night, or Friday mornings, we would Zoom in and talk about a diverse group of plays. And it's been a wonderful experience for my students. I suppose I can talk about later, but it's been absolutely wonderful. And the friendship that we have between us and the 2 director mentees and our 4 design students has been invaluable. And you want to pick it up?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what your director mentees are getting from that, and what that value's been on the, because it's still, they may not be in the university, but they're learning through this same channel, this same continuum.
Yeah, thanks. Hi everyone. Welcome. It's interesting that I'm noticing there are some communities of color sitting in the faculty. So there's nothing that their progressive minds, I'm sure, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Brackley, I don't know where to start. There's so many things. My sister said over here, and you said that my mind is just racing. But we'll first cover what we are here to cover, and then we'll talk about the consciousness.
Yeah, please feel free, everyone, to wherever this leads is fine.
Yeah, thank you. No, I have 2 directing mentees. One is an Ojibwe, his name is Windigo, Curtis Kirby. He's in Minneapolis, and Ismail Khalidi, he's a Palestinian American. His dad, I'm just mentioning that because of academic connections. Yeah. He's the head of the Edward Said Chair at Columbia University on Middle Eastern Studies. So both of them come from deep education. One brought up by his grandmother Sharon Day, who's an icon in the indigenous community. She's a Medellin. She's two-spirit. So Kirby, the Ojibwe, my mentee, is being brought up. I'm just talking about pedagogy being, when we increase the consciousness of the word pedagogy. So he's brought up by indigenous way of working, indigenous communities, right? And Ismail Khalidi, father is the Edward Said Chair in Columbia, grown up with books. Mother is a librarian. They were from Chicago actually, before when he went to college here. And so he grew up with, just like our colonized education is. I mean, we can sit down and wax eloquence about, American prose poetry drama, English prose poetry drama, Irish prose poetry drama. I mean, you know what pedagogy is. But so I purposely took these two distinctly different ways of seeing and learning and being as my mentees. And they're not in their late 20s or mid 30s, I don't know the exact age. So the first one is important to talk about the bodies that we are first talking about, because Gertie would never, they cannot afford to go to MFA or BFA, for theatre in their minds. And so, but he's brought up by one of the most progressive lesbian, indigenous, like cutting edge, dangerous woman, who's his grandmother. And so that's his education. Ismail has got an MFA from Columbia, and he followed the right path, and whatever the right path, he followed the path. A path. Yeah. So therefore, I'm taking these youngs to mind because I made a commitment that I will make a Palestinian American and an Ojibwe person. I want to make them the best directors in the country. That's my commitment. And once I make the commitment, you have to figure out how the fuck. Sorry, academic, not parliament. How the hell do you make it happen? And so that's when so you first connected, like you said, the relationship that you already have in the field. And you have a lot of relationship when you work in these regional theaters. You pick up the phone, everybody answers. Now I call the same people, they don't have time. But actually, in regional theater, I've been in URTA with the University of Minnesota with a big badge called the Cultivating Theater Resident Director, and over here. So I know the other side. So therefore we reached out to Brackley, and I am making these directors who have never had the fortune of being in a training with this type of faculty, right? They've had their other teachers, but so therefore I reached out to Brackley and I said, I was bringing in set designers to talk to them, lighting, costume designers to talk to them. So then I reached out for lighting, because lighting is mine, coming from a third world, lighting design is the set because you don't have money for sets, right? So I reached out to Brackley because I worked with Brackley, and I said, can you just come and talk like what you said? And then that small seed just expanded into this huge thing, and Brackley invited 3 of the lighting design students to talk to 2 of my mentees directly. So they would present their design of any particular play. Everybody would give, and I remember Brackley said, so what do you want to get out of it? I said, the primary conversation between a director and a designer, if that's at the core of it, if they get, everything else will fall into place. So it started with that everybody gives feedback to their presentation, and I thought just like, you get invited, which is always an event, you get invited to diversity events, and then they wonder why nothing has changed, because it's a damn event. It happens once in 365 days. So, but with Brackley, we started, and then one semester finished, and so amongst us, there's always corridor conversation. People of color, after the panel is over, the real panel happens. But now I made a commitment, there will only be one conversation, and it happened in front of all of us. That's my commitment. And we all made the commitment as a theatre. So cut the corridor shit, because that keeps us marginalized. So when I talked to Brackley, and Brackley gave this idea, and so one semester happened, and we thought that's fantastic. And the directing mentees, not just the mentees, we don't do this for students, we do it for ourselves also, it's not that we have all arrived at the epiphanic moment of progressive consciousness and we're only doing it for the students. We're doing it for ourselves. I've never had this, a sustained relationship with students and faculty, and students and faculty who will look at, a faculty who will look at my Ojibwe 30-year-old directing mentee as if he has got cred, right? They do not have degrees. I don't even know what his academic background. But next semester, then again, Brackley invited, and next semester, and then we started having an ownership of this work because somebody inside the system, which was Brackley, I'm talking with you as if you were the third person. Some faculty inside the third person. No, so because, and then now this is our third year, and literature that shifted. Talking about pedagogy, literature has shifted, and so I started bringing in my friends who are in the field, live playwrights also to talk to the students.
Yeah, that was fascinating. We had one of his friends who's a playwright who joined us on the Zoom. Now the Zoom thing, because some of my colleagues heard what we were doing and said, "Well, can we join? Can we join?" It's like, I love you, but no, because I don't want it to be a Brady Bunch with 5 million boxes. It needs to be intimate. So it's our 4 lighting designers. Now I have 4 lighting designers and you 3. But then you can have 1 or 2 other people come at a time. So we had a playwright he was from New York. He joined us and he was fascinating. And at the end, I emailed him and I said, "Oh, thank you for joining us." He said, "Brad, anytime." Because he had found a bathroom in some New York theater he was working at to Zoom in, and he just took the time to do that. It was fascinating.
And Jay, you may know him. He was artistic director of Victoria over here in Chicago. Now he's working in New York. So, but what does that say also, Jay? Spoke that why in order to get respectable enough money to survive, you're working in these large institutions. I'm conscious enough using the word right. Large institutions, and then in order to talk about your own play to the future directors and designers, the only legit space that you have is a bathroom. Just think about that. We had an Asian American theater conference which we hosted and the location was the Guthrie. We had 3, like David Henry Wong, Asian American. They are the top Asian American playwrights. Not one of their plays have happened, and I was a resident director of Guthrie, had happened on the main stage. It has all happened in the black box. So you see the politics of space. We have to talk about it. It's not just about recruiting a faculty of color or faculty students of color. So when we have all these conversations, the play gets discussed, and then all this conversation, like what you're asking, gets discussed. And so now this is our 3rd year, and from our side, and we look at it very critically. And we're waiting to see, okay, where does the whiteness drop again? Where does the whiteness drop again? But it's interesting, starting from literature, and I'm not saying this because Brackley is here, I'm saying this because that is what has happened. The literature shifted, the playwrights that we are discussing shifted, consciousness of the gender shifted, consciousness whether they are LGBTQ playwrights or not shifted, the space was created where this conversation can happen. And now, for the first time, at least among us, like 2 of the students, lighting design students, one is the black brother Jordan, and the other is Hasmin, Mexican American, and they are the 2 students. And so here we have a black, director, lighting design student, Hasmin, who's a Mexican American designing student, and Ojibwe young director, and a Palestinian director, and their mentors are, I'm from India and South Africa and other places, So diversity has shifted from including, in these regional theaters, one black actor in the act, 3, or Minnesota Opera touting its amazing, progressiveness by the first conductor they have got in 60 years. I said, you're 60 years behind. And then like what you said, that, bringing in a person of color and expecting them to revolutionize change. But every structure is set against you. You're set up to fail. And so that's why the importance of Brackley inside the academy has to be acknowledged, because if Brackley, you were not there, we would still be outside the building. You see, so somebody from inside shifts the system. We have, it's not that people of color have suddenly woken up to be part of the pedagogy. We have always existed, right? People in power have chosen not to acknowledge that. So, so that's why it's important that the system shifts, not individual participation. And this is our 3rd year, and we are stepping into the 4th year.
Yeah, and it's been interesting, because when I first started, it was polite, we're on Zoom, it's polite. We would take 1 week to talk about just the play, and the second week, the designers would kind of have their concepts and their ideas. But then by that second semester, as you said, it really got involved, and people were being critical. What if we do this? What if we do this? And the designers would show some of their drawings and their research, and then all of a sudden, he'd show up, he'd be scribbling under Zoom, and he'd hold up this picture. This is what I want the play to look like. And then by that time, the 2 director then concluded the same thing. All of a sudden, they realized what was happening. It was really, really wonderful. And Kirby, last fall, when we came on, we always go chit chat before we start the show. But he said, I'd like to show you how it's actually able to converse with lighting design. They knew what and they thanked me for really talking about it that way. So we're doing something.
Yeah.
It's great.
I think it would be great if we heard, I know you both have some quotes from the students and the mentees. I'd love to hear that, but I also just think it's just want to underscore the important takeaway of the fact that not waiting for the university or the administration or the department to initiate change or to do it, but just that you can just take your own initiative and do these things, and it doesn't always have to be that feeling of no agency or inactivity, and because my department is this and the university, but you can just do it.
And with Zoom, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Without
Right.
Zoom, we couldn't bring all these people in.
Sure.
It's really, really impossible. So anybody can do it, and that's why I'm saying create your own village. Just find other people that you want to collaborate with, and collaboration, and make it work.
Yeah.
I wanted to, when I talked to Tony, it would be great if we could Zoom in students, we could have a discussion. And he said, a hotel wants $8 million to
Yeah.
a lot of money to do that. So I asked 2 of the students to just do say a few words about what they thought about the course. So then this one student says, in our course we have the ability to explore unconventional plays that touch on topics of gender, sexuality, race, class, and so much more. As an individual who comes from several marginalized backgrounds, this class has allowed me to see myself represented in this industry through the artistry of the playwrights whose work we read. With this class, I'm not only able to share my own personal experiences, but listen to the perspective of others, broadening my own scope, outlook, and approach to designing in theater. Those are all that. And we did, actually, Jordan, we did his play. He's also a player, he's also a writing designer. And the other quote, Friday's discussions such as have been the most enriching conversations I've had the privilege of being a part of. Reading shows that aren't considered the quote norm of theater that force the readers to turn their eye on issues that are very real and serious, have helped me grow as a person and a designer. It has been an absolute joy being part of something that makes me feel seen as a person of color in theater in the world. So it's had an impact on our students and on yours.
Yeah. Was there anything from the mentees that they said that you wanted to?
I don't know. I was not as as my
No,
faculty.
the fact that Kirby did say pretty much
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
yes,
you know?
it is.
Ishmael is the same thing.
No, we would not continue, at this stage, Tony, at this stage of our career, we wouldn't do it if we really, I won't, because of my conversation with you and you said how, the concept of belonging, if it was again one of the EDI, inclusion, those type of terminologies, we won't participate if it is not, a real agency of shift. And my conversation with you, we did this and we would have continued doing that without being invited, but my conversation with you and your openness and when you said you chose the word belonging, I think nomenclature is so important. Even this word diversity, I never get up in the morning and, wherever I'm directing and say, oh, I'm a minority director. In your eyes, I might be, let's talk about craft, degrees. We can, if meritocracy is a conversation, let's talk about degrees. But, so these terminologies have never been phrased by people of color. Diversity, multiculturalism, what does it mean? And what happens is that it isolates people of color in some way, as if it's like, we also do domestic, in my conversation with you, domestic, like why I was, important for me that Brackley sits here, because it's not a people of color problem. It's like domestic violence. We have a domestic violence program where, in a conference of 750 women, in a conference, there were 750 women and 3 men. It was me who directed the play, and the brother from the hotel who was doing the lights, and Chuck Terry, who was one of the really brilliant women's advocates who lives in St. Cloud. 3 men in 750 women, and we're discussing domestic violence as a movement. So Liliana who has done Paulo Freire, Liliana Espandaguru, who really taught me Paulo Freire, she said that she called 3 of us and made us sit in the center and said, okay, you've been watching for 7 days, now you talk and we'll watch. And 750 these powerful tigresses are waiting to listen. So that something shifted in me that it is to have only people of color talk about diversity is what keeps it in place, the status quo. So I'm here today really, yes, the work we have done, but also my conversation with you and your openness about terminologies that when we discussed that, when I told you I hate the word inclusion, and everybody and their grandparents do EDI, work, and especially now you're hearing an urgency in my voice because, with what happened, the Zoom happened, pandemic happened, and George Floyd happened down our street.
Yes.
So there's a sense of immediacy and urgency, and so, and while we're talking, Memphis is happening, so the importance of this conversation goes beyond just universities and academic pedagogies. It's about the world we want to create, that we want to live in.
If I can piggyback off that, if I may, something that I have found that my colleagues and I do with each other is that if I have something that I'm working on in my teaching that's around EIB, I will go to a colleague, and not a colleague of color, and just say, hey, can I just talk through this thing that I'm doing? And so we're there to kind of listen and test things out. I'm not going to add additional work to my colleagues of color, but that I'm starting a conversation or keeping a conversation going that's beyond the one in-service day. And I get cranky having to go to those one in-service days. They're not often run very well. But if it's just a part of our conversation where we're talking about, hey, did this come up for you? What did you do when that was happening? It just feels really easy and light, and it kind of rises the tide of all boats.
Yeah, I think I would love to add that I just think it's important. Natalie, you were talking about invisible work, everything you were talking about, Dipankar, in terms of, only BIPOC people talking about it, what you're saying. But I think we just need to acknowledge that fear creates inaction, and so many people who are, coming to these conversations in good faith, but are scared, to be, and it's not, I've been in groups where, we create committees or work groups, for different initiatives and things, and often the white members of that group will say, well, I shouldn't be I shouldn't be the one leading that, because they feel like we should be centering, but then you talk about the invisible work,
Yeah.
it shouldn't, and as you're saying, Dipankar, it can't, by definition, can't be achieved, by keeping the voices separated.
Well, I think there's another version of that too, that's super scary, is that if there's a moment and you go, well, nobody said anything, so I guess it's fine. Right? Nobody said anything, so I guess it's fine, is because someone who may have been hurt by that moment decided to just eat it. So it's okay to go, you know what, I did not phrase that how I wanted to phrase it. And I think what I did may have done some harm. And I think that that's a scary way to go, but it's a much deeper way to go than waiting for somebody to bring up, or just kind of saying, there's not an elephant in the room, right, everybody? Right, faculty of color, right, students of color? That you kind of take the lead on those moments, and you do it even though your heart is going a million miles a minute and you're breaking out a cold sweat. You just do it.
Because if you don't, then the students will go to the chair. Right, so they will, right, they will. And so then it makes it my work again, right? Which is really interesting. So what I am hoping for with accountability is that willingness to say, I don't know, but we're gonna do this anyway, right? We're gonna try, because otherwise it's me calling you into my office and saying, yet another student has said these things. No, I'm not gonna tell you who it was so that you can retaliate, right? So, yeah, the accountability piece is big for me, is where do you start? What is your first step, right? And then share with your colleagues. Don't do it in a closet by yourself, right? I'm gonna read this thing, and we're gonna try it, and it'll fail miserably, and I'm never gonna tell anybody. Mistakes are okay. That's the other thing that I'm finding in training programs. We're afraid of mistakes. That we are very mistake adverse. When really, that's how we learn. Our students mess up, we learn in that way. And that's okay to acknowledge, that choice didn't actually work, right? We did this show, let's actually reflect on it and not just talk about how wonderful we are. Let's talk about, maybe this show wasn't the right show for this moment. And it didn't work because this didn't happen, or maybe we didn't dig deeply enough into the historical context or the socio-political context, right? But we have to reflect more actively together. A fear of failing or making a mistake is too much.
But I found that if you model vulnerability,
Yes.
you are very often met with grace.
I also understand so many faculty I know have been cancelled by cancel culture, and not all of the cancelling is legit, so there is a lot of fracture in this word called cultural competency. I can be the most conservative, patriarchal, misogynistic asshole, and a person of color, being a person of color, being invited, to expand diversity conversation. And I so badly want to be only in the regional theater, till you get decolonized. So what I'm saying is that, I often debate whether to bring this up or not. First, let us at least get us into the room, and then let's talk about the intricacies of politics. But, and what I'm saying is that the identity politics of North America, sometimes is its biggest silo maker. I completely intellectually understand why, it's like people say, oh, we have women's studies, why don't we have men's studies? That's bullshit, the conversation. Women's studies, we have a conversation because everything is men's studies. So that is why, so I understand why, but we also have to extend beyond these silos, and look beyond, profiling, ways of seeing. Because one, I won't mention name of one of the past presidents who had the most diverse cabinet in the history of North American politics. The Secretary of State, black sister, economic development head, Latinx brother. I mean, most diverse, cabinet in the history of North America, not just during the past 10 years, and what happened. So just having someone of color come in, and expecting the world to shift, there's a lot of fracture in this cultural competency work, So ultimately, developing authentic relationship like what we have developed and journey regardless of challenges, like what you said, there will be problems, there will be pitfalls, but we don't leave the room in Pangea. When I left the regional theaters and I started, we created Pangea because my teacher Atul Fugar, he said, all of you young guys, you know what is not happening in regional theaters. You sit together over here smoking and then say, this is not happening, this is not. If you're saying no to something, you've got to say yes to something else. Otherwise, it's just impotent rage and it does not do anything. So that's why a few of us just got out and they could afford to get out. I did not realize that my work visa was with the company. So when I very politically resigned, I realized I was illegal next day. Oh God, those were some horrible days. So therefore, it's the point which I'm making is that that it has to be a systemic shift, and just because we have a person of, we don't assume progressiveness, but because of an individual, when the system is against, the system is, against. So even funding, like regional funding, is very good in Minnesota, and even national funding, primarily, at every level is there, and I think the academics can really influence that. It's the same. Who gets the money? Why do now Pangea after 25 years now we have a land, and now we're going to I don't even know how they're raising $18 million supposedly. I don't even know how many zeros there are. We had 1 million. To get our space, but we'll be the only person of color who has its own space. Penumbra, which is a regional theater, is inside a community center. So you see, echoes of this conversation is like in multiple spheres. It does not stop here. So, so I think first we have to be in the room which we are, hopefully, and then we have to build collaborative politics, like what you said and what you're saying, and how do we sustain these relationships, And I think sustainable, that what you said, once you get the student, then what, right? Not just in the academic, even my choices, when I give my choices of directing in the regional theater, they found at that time of my career, now different. They said, most of you, these are too. I said, what is the problem with this? And so then it's too political. I said, what do you want me to do? I said, do you want me to do what? Oscar Wilde? And people jumped up and said, yes, Oscar Wilde is not political. I mean, you don't know what they're talking about. But these people are, the producing directors. And then I do understand that even, some progressive people in importance who say provide money and funding, but they walk into these rooms of trustees and board members where the conversation has not shifted for the past 60 years. There is somebody who's very progressive, Eleanor Savage, white, great friend, brilliant performance artist. She's in big regional the foundation. But she said, you know, Dipankar, when I and she's a supporter of all what we are talking about. When she walked into her board meeting and she said that we should do this. She said, what is this talk about equity? I mean, you know, we already do diversity. That's it, conversation table. And I said, I asked her, what did you do? She said, I just was so stunned that I just did not know what to say next. Like this, as if the past years have not happened, you know. So we have to look at it now. Then we look at it with sympathy. That what can we do to support these our white colleagues in these foundations, in these colleges, because they are encountering rooms of trustees and boards and all the important words, you know, and people. Because we have to sort of. Therefore, this relationship that with Brackley and we are creating. I'm so conscious that maybe Brackley, being the head of the department, can bring in changes without maybe acceptance. But you know, so the consciousness and empathy has to be reciprocal. Like looking at you, Tony, and say, Tony, why aren't you doing ABCD? You know, this makes somebody feel very self-righteous, and well, you can be all your self-righteous self, but then what changed? So we have to work together. You know, that's the point which you said it in a very pithy way, and I rambled for.
I do want to jump on the whole money thing, and kind of putting your money where your mouth is. So that when you are inviting folks of color, folks that are marginalized into spaces, to expand and broaden the thinking, the consciousness, you have to pay them. Yes. And you need to pay them what they're worth. Right, so even if they're on Zoom, you need to pay them as if they were in the room with you, because once again, that is invisible labor, right? I'm just gonna be very honest, having to be in space that is predominantly white is exhausting, and it's a code switch, right? So me trying to be very clear in my behavior and how I'm functioning in that moment is costing me something. Maybe it's a tiny bit of my soul, I don't know, right? But you need to pay me then. If I'm gonna do that and help you to make these shifts, yep, I need dinero, right? And I have been very conscious about who are we inviting in? Who are the guest artists? Because of course everybody has their network of people, right? Those best friends that they've been working with for 30 years, we're not bringing them in anymore. In order to pay attention to representation that does not exist in that space, what are we doing? We really have challenges in design tech. We don't talk about that very much in here. It's much easier to find actors and directors of color. It is really hard to find. We're doing 2 searches right now, and our pool is super tiny when it's looking at designers and technicians of color. That means something. We're not training them, right? We're not pulling those BAs who think they're gonna be performers and they're terrible.
Yeah.
We're not pulling them in to say, and what, right? What else are you doing? What else are you exploring? I really believe in the liberal arts. I even have a little bit of difficulty with our VFAs. Because we're kind of setting them up to be tunnel vision when that's not what the world is asking them to be. So I think that they need skills. They need to understand what's available to them, and they'll work. As designers, as technicians, they will work.
That's a good one. Circling back to the URTA recruiting. I mean, that's the challenge that I've been going to URTA for. And since it was in Northwestern, but you know, the pool of applicants is getting a little better, but it's still not where I think it needs to be. And when I was on the board trying to, crash our brains to find out how we can increase that, going to the HBCU schools, and educating the fact that design is a good career.
Yeah.
So that's been a challenge.
Had arts leadership and directing and stage management, all those things. Yeah. I want to make sure we have some time for questions too, because I'm sure there's some folks have some questions. Let's start with Stan. No.
Can everybody use the microphone?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I can sort of Phil Donahue it here if we. Oh, that's your question. Okay, yeah. So answer that question is easy. Answer yes. Nick.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how mental illness factors into this conversation. As you know, through the pandemic, so much came to the surface in our school, and so much of what I've been dealing with as a faculty member as well has been how do I get through this morass of this huge resurfacing, or rather coming to the forefront, mental illness on all levels, as a way of enabling a more productive dialogue, to be able to push the dial forward.
Big topic.
Yeah, I will say for me, I am now of a mindset where I assume rigor. If someone turned in something late, I used to assume that it was then my responsibility to go in and go, well, why is this late? No. But now, if someone turns in something late or it's not turned in, my first question is now, how can I help? What do you need? And it's not that I'm gonna fix it, but that we're gonna partner in how to move the thing forward. And that's a mental illness, that's a structural inequality question, but it doesn't cost me anything or take away from what I'm offering them to say, let's learn how to get this thing done, because at the end of the day, that's the responsibility, is that it gets done however it gets done. So that's the big thing for me now, is just, I assume rigor, I assume people want to do things, I don't think people are blowing me off, I don't think people are lazy. And we're gonna work together to get the thing done. It means that I'm running a multi-level classroom in every classroom I'm in.
But part of that question for me also makes me think about neurodiversity, and that we have learned how to teach and train in one way. And that we're at a point now where there's so much research that says that the one way means that you are forgetting 70% of the people in your room, that it is our job to also figure out, okay, how do we teach differently? Zoom helped us a little bit, right? How in the world do you teach acting on Zoom or design? And I think what I've been encouraging is keep that willingness to shift and use it, rather than saying, oh good, now we can go back to normal. And then also extending grace. Think about yourself and your own mental health. And if you understand yourself as a human, then those people who are sitting in the room with you deserve that same amount of respect and understanding. They're not gonna always tell you how they're feeling or what's happening with them, but that acknowledgement that that's a human and something is up, and extending the grace, I think, is really, really helpful. I'm not a therapist, so I don't want you to come in and tell me all your business. I don't. We have resources on campus, and I know how to direct you in that way. We've been doing mental health first aid safety, right? That training for all of the faculty, so that you know where those resources are and you don't get stuck. I'm also in the middle. I'm also very, very conscious of cancel culture, where the student says, I told them all of these things and then they used it against me in class. That has happened to us, where they've been revealing, talking to the faculty member, and then the faculty member brings that into the classroom. Don't do that. Right. Right. That's a no-no. But yeah, mental health first aid training, if you have access to it, take it. It's amazing. And find out what those resources are on campus that are not you. Because you are not trained to do it and should not be providing therapy for students.
Jed?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. And Natalie, if I may, I'm particularly grateful for all of you to be here, for not making it so easy, for saying how difficult it is. Because we have a tendency sometimes in these conferences to get together and congratulate ourselves on what we're doing, and we're not doing enough. None of us. I'm not doing enough, you're not doing enough, but we're trying. However, I think it's really good for us to recognize and to say it's difficult. And it's difficult because we need more buy-in from administration above us and from those that we're administrating below us as a chair. I also want to say, in terms of resources, I think that that's really important, because I don't think there are enough resources that we're making available to all students, but in particular, students who are the others. Whether you're a student of color, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's neurodiversity. I know I've worked really hard. Part of my initiative coming to UCLA was to change the nature of the diversity in the department. It's happening, but we're still not offering enough resources to help people who aren't traditional university students, especially in the graduate departments. So we can't just bring them in, we have to help them stay in, and we have to help them survive. However, on the other side of that spectrum, respectfully, I'm not disagreeing, but I want to add, this conversation of the cancel cultures I find very interesting and a little tricky, because I agree with almost everything that's been said. However, in my opinion, I think there's a big needed shift that needed to happen in society in general, in education, and in the arts. And that's happening. Two things about that, and I'll try to make them quick. One of them is, it's gone so much, we're having all these hires that I'm worried are hires that are set up to fail, because we're gonna go, see, that's not working. We tried to bring this person in at, let's say for example, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and it's not working, so we're gonna go back to the way it used to be. So they need to have the resources and the support, the same way as our students. The other thing about cancel culture that I think is a little tricky is we have to give more voice to students, but we have to be careful. Our job is to educate them, and our job is sometimes to challenge them. So because my field is primarily physical theater, I open that up to everybody, but even if you're in a wheelchair, I'm asking you to find a sense of rigor in your work that you can do with a wheelchair. So I think within cancel culture, we have to be careful that we're not lowering standards. We should expand standards and reimagine standards, but if we're going to put people up who are going to either go to be educators or go into the professional world or go to work at some other level, in particular, we people of color, we need to keep them up. Thank you. So, resources. What do we do about that for students in particular? Thank you.
Anyone want to touch on resources? I think, it really comes down to, in the end, money, right? And what you were saying, what are the priorities of resources,
Yeah.
right?
Right, and what's on campus already, I spent months trying to hunt things down that I knew existed, but they're just not, our website is a hot mess. So trying to find them was ridiculous. But then, once they are found, making sure that they are disseminated over and over and over again. The other thing that we did is we put a bunch of stuff. Our syllabi are now ridiculously long, but it's there, it's present, it's written, it's available. Here are all of the places that if you can't afford therapy, here are the resources, not just on campus, but also in the community. If you cannot, we have a violence prevention center on campus, which is really tiny, and people don't know about it. So how do you make the invisible resources available as well? And then also the money part, right? If you need some training or support, part of my job as chair, as head, is to make those resources available. For students as well, we have a ton of working class students where things like you are supposed to, for our MT students, you're supposed to do lessons, your individual lessons, right? And you're supposed to pay your accompanist. With what? right? With what? So you need to have that, okay, great, here's the resource so that you can do that and won't be behind because you don't have that resource available to you. And it means shifting what the priorities are. So no, that money isn't for everybody, right? No, you can afford your shoes, your dance shoes, great, pay for those dance shoes. The people who cannot afford to pay for those dance shoes, this pool of money is for that. It is met with a little bit of dis-ease, often the decisions that I'm making, but I'm good with that, right? And it is part of that, I'm making good trouble.
Yeah. Yes, okay.
I can have it.
Okay.
Yeah, I did go with you as well. I'm Sam, I'm a director of admission for performing arts at the New School in New York, and I wanted to, we touched on it very briefly right at the end before we opened it up about recruitment and meeting these students where they're at. And I appreciate all of you are all modeling such openness and curiosity about these conversations with these young people and pedagogy and all of those sorts of things. Both our MFA and BFA programs are interdisciplinary and making focused. We're often talking to people, young people, and also just beginning, emerging, I guess, I don't know if that's still the word we use for folks, but emerging artists who are developing into interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary artists, makers rather than actors, directors, things like that. And especially in the undergraduate space, but I'm finding even in my time at URTA in the last couple of weeks, that often gets met with kind of a deer in headlights moment. And so I wanted to just sort of get your thoughts on two things, two questions. One, just Natalie, you mentioned trying to avoid pouring information into people's heads, right? Trying to make it a little bit more participatory. I'd love your thoughts on ways to operationalize aspiration in the recruitment process, right? So like folks who are coming out of a high school situation or an undergraduate situation where they have been whittled down to thinking of themselves as only an actor, only auditioning, only doing that, into feeling included in the conversation in expansive art making and personal storytelling. And then in terms of resources, thoughts about ways to not only have that conversation of directing monetary and other resources towards students in the admission process, allowing for greater access to all these different things, but also ways to change how we judge these students, right? How we shift the conversation away from skill, talent, which is often access to training prior to the process, and more about how we evaluate these students for their curiosity, their cultural humility, things like that, soft skills. I'd love your thoughts on both those things.
There's a lot to chew on.
I feel like I'm talking too much. Okay, let's start with the second one. First, change the rubric, right? The rubric of this is what we're looking for needs to shift, and maybe it's take some risks and see how they pan out rather than being safe. I think we're very used to, okay, we know that this student will succeed here. Once again, then we're paying attention to fit and tradition, which means that people who don't fit won't get the training. And we'll just keep that cycle going forever. So change the rubric. What is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for someone who is interesting and exciting and willing and shows the potential, maybe not all the skill? Right? Yeah. Okay, what was the first question?
It's about those conversations with folks who have been kind of like supported in thinking of themselves as only one way. How can we, as admissions people specifically, not in pedagogy, because once they're there, right, they have this opportunity to grow and expand, but in that short moment where I'm talking to them, avoiding like pouring the idea of interdisciplinary art making into their head while also inviting them in. If they're looking for an MFA in acting, like how do we get them to think more expansively?
That's exciting for me because I think of myself as an interdisciplinary artist. I always ask about transferable skills, right? As an actor, what are you doing? What do you have available to you? And how are you using that? Really, you're a storyteller. That's what all of us are doing. So we're able to, you know, it might be fun to just have a conversation about, oh, you do that thing? Like I illustrate picture books. Wow, maybe that means that I might want to think about costuming, or there are so many other options available that I've talked to our grads about this a lot, that narrowing in sometimes is to your detriment. That sometimes you want to make sure that you're in grad school to expand your abilities and your possibilities. And we also have hired new faculty that's already their mindset, right? It's all about interdisciplinarity. That's what we do as theater artists. We just don't say it very often.
I would love to talk about this because I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want excellent specialists who can also work as generalists. And we don't have tracks in our program currently. That may change eventually. But when I'm teaching the skills, I will say, my MT folks know it as this, my spoken word folks know it as this, my voiceover people know it as this, but the skills are the skills are the skills. We're getting really sharp on them. And then how you apply them is up to you. You know, we're not just all kind of mucking around not knowing anything. That we go really sharp so that we can apply it in new and interesting ways. I think it's a really excellent question, how we balance specialists and generalists together.
If I can answer, just wanted to add, you know, your second question, you know, the financial situation in schools, I am not qualified to answer that. But the second question of, you know, about this is URTA, this is an audition, so that's why I thought that I'll share this with your question. That you know, the play that I was mine just you know, outside of the regional circuit when I started it. And so my audition was going on, there were 75 people, and you know, we're just moving ahead, and then my state manager at the end of the day comes and tells me, this is in Minneapolis, says that there's this, what did she say? There is this man who wants to talk to you. I said, you know the schedule, man talks to me. You know, she wants, and so while I was talking, the gentleman, you know, so I was talking to her, and then he just walks in and said, it's me. And he had this just flowing white hair up to his shoulders and tall, everybody. So he, you know, and she said he wants to audition. And, so he was already there. I can't say I'm busy, you know. I said, okay, and I just because of his age, I just said that, let us do it, instead of arguing in front of him, you know, that we don't have time and how could she do that. And I said, okay, let's just do it because you were right there. So, you know, so schooled, with all my academia in different countries, you know, about audition process, headshot resume, you know, it comes and you read and you see and you pass it on to your assistant and you don't know where it goes to casting director. So he says that, so I said, oh, I said, do you have a headshot? I said, what? He's asking me. He said, what's that? I said, you know, just photograph of, you know, so that we can remember. In my culture, you know, we don't take photographs, it sucks out our souls. You know, with all my education, with all my experience, and with all, like, I just did not know what I thought. So, you know, and you know, I was really, the currency of smooth talk came to a halt because I don't know what to say next. And I said, okay, then I just wanted to get out of my embarrassment, and I just said, okay, Jim, so I just have his name, you know. I said, Jim, so Jim, you know, we are auditioning for a play. We have to see what you can do. Something can you do? Well, what would you like to do? He said, can I tell you a story? It was a relief for me. I said, yes. Yeah. So that, you know, I wanted to get out of this absolute awkward moment of, with all my education, I did not know what the hell to do next. You know? So he came, he went on to the stage and he said, "Can I tell you a story?" And I said, "Yeah, please tell the story." He was 75 years old, you know, and so he started just, you know, pantomiming, like he's trying to get the fire going on a wood, and then he became the coyote, and then he somersaulted like and landed, and then he started telling the story, and then he played all the different kids. Everything that I needed to see, movement, how comfortable with their body, articulation, speech, ability to handle language, and you know, and he was Ojibwe, you know, and it just stopped a flow of years of education and litmus test of how to view auditions. You know, and from that day on, I don't, you know, the whole form, you know, acting, movement, vocabulary, comfortable with language, you know, that whole thing, of course it is there, you know, the structure, because every structure was created to aid a process, so it's not demeaning a structure, you know, that helps, but and more. So the retina that filters craft, we have to work on to shift. You know, what are the ways that allow, you know, like in regional, there's foundation still tell us, you know, success. How many people of color were in the audience? I never want to answer that question. What difference does it make? You know, what percentage on the and the Guthrie had, you know, it's 1,400 seats. How many people of color in the audience? 6. I mean, so what? You know, and what if there were 5,000 of them? You know, so the matrices of, you know, what is artistic excellence? You know, even in NEA, when you sit in this panel, artistic excellence, artistic merit, and at the bottom of it you get extra marks. If underserved communities, you know, are, you know, the extra marks for that. Extra marks for if you include somebody from an underserved community. This is NEA. We make policies for the nation. You know, so you see, the work is immense, and so much work has to get done. So I just wanted to say about audition and what you want to see, you know, needs to shift. The whole nomenclature needed to shift.
Yeah. Wow. And we are just about out of time. Maybe we can do one more.
It's been very patient.
I got it. Hi. My name is Dane. I'm a candidate. I came into undergrad in 2016, a couple of years before, like when you could say the revolution was a brewing. And I graduated in 2020, coming into obviously a completely new market, a completely new landscape than what was promised, but also a lot of important conversations that had never been had. And we're still having them today. And now coming in as a candidate for my MFA for a terminal degree, and coming in wanting to be the next generation of educators in the arts. My question to you is, what in this time, for your students who are training and receiving and collaborating in the midst of the revolution, in this period of change, 3, 5, 10 years, their whole career down the line, what do you hope they gain from this experience and take forward out of the frustrations of existing and trying to stay soft in an institution that maybe wasn't built for them, as a queer person, as a person of color, as a person with a disability, physical or otherwise. What do you see from a person who is able to persevere through all of that and be a part of the change that's happening now? How would you like to see them embodying the change in the future?
I don't want my students to get fed into a broken machine. I want them to change the machine. I want them to walk into spaces with the agency and empowerment to say, that's not right, or this is how I do my best work. And the work will be better for it. That's my hope. And when the students are excellent, I feel like the industry sits up and notices and takes the note. That's how I feel.
I also think it's really important that we pay attention to that some of our graduate students want to teach, and that we teach them how to teach. That we provide them with opportunities to think about pedagogy. So who are you and what works for you in the classroom? You gotta try stuff. You can't simply, what's happening or has happened is that we simply reflect back in the classroom how we've been trained. And sometimes it's incredibly toxic and problematic. And therefore we then have a cycle of institutions that don't work. I mentored one of our directing grad students last year, and he wanted to do ungrading in his class. And I was like, great, try it, right? You gotta, if this is something you're passionate about, you have to make the attempt. Otherwise, he's just going to do things by the book, and when he leaves, he's going to do things by the book. And I really love folks who shake things up and problematize and trouble the waters a little bit. Everybody else may not like it. And you have to figure out when you can and when you can't do those things, and who will support, who's got your back when you wanna try something different. And there are faculty who will be there with you, right? That are like, yeah, and then let's be reflective practitioners and continuously come back, because maybe that doesn't work. And then what do? How do you shift?
And in the design world, our students, or more and more of our students, want to do things other than theater. I mean, they want to be immersive, they want to do television, we have a few conventions in town, and they want to work on the convention design. So we're finding that we're changing, and we've been changing for the past number of years, where they don't, whatever they want to do, well, some sort of things they have to do, but we want them to explore their identity and who they are.
If I understand your question, I think we generate the world that we want it to be. You know, we generate it, and I think relationships like what we have created and what we can create among each other, and in India we believe that there's an idiom which says that if you're waiting with a basket under a mango tree, that that once that mango ripens, it will fall, and it will fall straight in my basket. You keep waiting for the rest of your life. So instead of that, we are just planting orchards of mangoes. And I think I really believe that I hear what you're really saying, that talking about challenges, yes, but that should be, say, 60% of the conversation, maybe, in case people don't know why there is inequity. I listen to that with less empathy, as if today we realize that there is inequity. But 40% has to be what you are asking, because we know the problem, and what next? And I think we envision an alternate, and what type of a world that we want to live in, if that's your question. We want to live in a world where this conversation is turned prehistoric. Unfortunately, 50 years ago, what the conversation was about race and gender, is happening nationally right now at Memphis. So we have to have our own personal, maybe, matrices of growth. Which conversation in our head has had an expiry date, or are we just regurgitating with a different language? And we have to be our own conscience, and then systems will shift. But sometimes we say the system is too big, we can't do anything. But who made the system? Individuals. So right? Your presence in your position is a shift. And it's not a popular shift. We don't get into these places to be popular. But I really believe that that's where we get into these places, we get invited to talk about craft, but so much of our conversation goes in, we never get, as a director of color, I do not say, I'm not speaking for all people of color, as me, as a director of color, before we even engage in the conversation, we arrive at the conversation of aesthetic. That's like the last 3 minutes, in a 10-minute talk, and 7 of those minutes we are talking about inequity, And I want to wait for a sunrise where we are invited and we can all engage in the work that we are doing, the artistic work, the creative work, the poetry of our existence. And I hear what you're saying, because I really believe it's possible. And we generate, in South Africa, when I was growing up, my music teacher, Mrs. Reed, this old lady would teach us, and when we would say apartheid, all this conversation about possibility, and we would say apartheid is not over, and Mrs. Reed, bless her heart, I'm sure she's no longer, she's an ancestor now, Mrs. Reed would say, apartheid is not over, and she would not let us go right from grade 1, finish the sentence, I can hear her voice, and we had to say, apartheid is not over yet. And only when we say yet, she said, okay, dismiss. So, all these problems that we are talking about, if 25 years from now, Tony comes up with the same agenda, then we have failed. So your question is pivotal to me, that, there is an alternate, and we as artists, and Miles Davis said that we as artists, need to envision the alternate and share with others how to get there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to thank all of you for coming. Thank you.